Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about Godzilla vs. Megaguirus from the fabled year 2000. And I remember when 2000 was some far off future year of flying cars and cities on the moon and the Soviet Union still being around. In any case, having done a hard reboot of the Godzilla franchise in 1994 and then a soft reset in 1999, Godzilla 2000 didn't explicitly wipe the earlier 90s films out of continuity, but it notably dropped the characters and themes that they'd all shared. Toho did another reboot with this movie just a year later. And so the film begins with a potted summary of the new continuity that it establishes. Godzilla first appeared in 1954 and trashed Tokyo, then rampaged again in 1966 and 1996. In each case, after that first attack, the lure was nuclear energy. The 1966 attack targeted Japan's first nuclear plant, while the 1996 attack focused on a plasma reactor, which the Japanese government had believed would not be detected by Godzilla's radiation sensing nose. No one actually says Godzilla has a radiation sensing nose. I suppose I should mention that. He's clearly able to detect radiation somehow, so that's my explanation. Anyway, the authorities decide to deal with their big lizard problem by shooting Godzilla with a miniature black hole. And if your immediate reaction to that idea is that's going to go horribly wrong, then congratulations, you are too smart to be a character in this movie. In fact, the very first test of the weapon opens a rift in space-time, allowing a giant prehistoric dragonfly to enter the present day and leave behind an egg sac before it returns to the past. All of which means, of course, that pretty soon Japan's going to be relying on their big lizard problem as the only possible cure for their big bug problem. So Toho decided to return to the Godzilla well with the same writing team as the previous film, but a new man at the directorial helm. Masaki Tezuka had previously worked as an assistant on other kaiju films, including Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, but would now take the big chair. The writing team, on the other hand, were carried over directly from Godzilla 2000, though, as I noted earlier, they distanced everything about that movie when making this one. Now, I don't know how they felt about ditching all their previous work, but I do know how they would have felt about the performance of the movie at theatres, which is not good. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus had a box office gross that barely exceeded its production cost, which is not a success. And I can't say I'm surprised at the movie's failure because the film they made is a bit of a turkey, which is a shame because unlike some of the other terrible entries in the franchise, or Monsters Attack, I am talking about you, this movie does actually seem to be trying to be good. It just misfires in pretty much every way imaginable. So, let's talk about what went wrong. And I suspect that the picture's first problem was that the creative team appear to have had fundamentally incompatible ideas about what the film should be. Director Masaki Tezuka was apparently a big fan of Aliens and wanted to do something similar. Unfortunately, that's an ambition that seems to be entirely at odds with the writer's plans. You see, they decided to target a lighter and less violent tone in their script because they felt that that better suited the film's New Year release window. Now, the problem here is that a huge part of what makes Aliens such a successful movie is the edge of menace it maintains. When you have a script consciously steering away from that tone and instead aiming to be more family friendly, you are not set to make very satisfying cinema. You just get limp, tension-free pastiche of a better movie. Now, the scenes in here aren't the worst Aliens knockoff efforts I've ever sat through, but that's a very low bar indeed because I've seen both Jason X and Shocking Dark. Now, perhaps, even with these fundamentally conflicting creative agendas at work, it might have been possible for the team to thread the needle and still make a good movie, but they would need a far better script. The first problem with the script is a simple one. The story relies far too heavily on people making obviously bad decisions. I've already mentioned the whole let's make a black hole weapon, which turns out to be every bit the disaster the words black hole weapon immediately suggest, but then there's the whole means by which the insect swarm menace comes about. You see, some kid finds the prehistoric dragonfly's egg sac. Not only does he not tell anyone, but he then takes it and manages to transport it across the country without anyone noticing he has it. Why does he take it? How does he secretly transport it? Why does he secretly transport it? Oh, and after, none of these questions will be answered. And then after that, when the sac begins oozing a strange liquid, he dumps it in the sewer, still without telling anyone. All of which is just I mean, if you want a character to make a series of improbable and obviously bad decisions in your script, you need a better reason than, well, he's a kid and kids do dumb things sometimes. Just in case the movie didn't have enough problems, mind you, the director decided the script needed to provide a clear scientific background to the story. In an interview, he explained it this way: I needed clear scientific reasons. It is impossible to create a black hole gun. Godzilla himself is totally unrealistic, but I needed them for the story. Therefore, I thought providing scientific rationales were all the more important. Which is, again, a really weird call. Anyone going to a Godzilla movie has already bought into the idea of Godzilla existing. You don't need to justify it. And as for the black hole gun, um, rather than coming up with lots of boring techno babble for a nonsense invention, maybe just come up with a better idea for why your giant prehistoric dragonfly got loose instead. Wouldn't that be more sensible? Still, this is a Godzilla film, which means that at the end of the day, the script is primarily a vehicle for justifying giant monster action. Incompatible creative plans and boneheaded script decisions might be forgiven if the kaiju scenes really bring it. But alas, this movie is no torrent shipment. The sequence where God's Tokyo is overrun by thousands of human-sized insects should be a cool spectacle. It was in Gamera 2, Attack of Legion, a few years earlier, which has a very similar premise, but it utterly fails to live up to that potential in this film. The swarm later tangles with Godzilla and come off distinctly second best, but some of them survive and spawn a kaiju-sized super dragonfly with a sonic attack, which is kind of a reskin of Mothra, basically, except a villain this time, which, come to think of it, already existed in the franchise in the form of Batra, so why not just bring him back? In any case, the emergence of this Megaguirus form of the dragonfly is, of course, the signal for the film's climactic act. And on paper, looks like a good idea. The monster design is cool, and a flying foe should work well against the more powerful but less maneuverable Godzilla. In execution, alas, the fight falls short. Again and again, the film sets up big set-piece moments that ought to be cool, and again they misfire. It's pretty much 20 straight minutes of going for a home run and hitting foul ball after foul ball instead. Which is a shame, because I get the feeling, as I said, that the people making this movie really did want to make something good. They just didn't. Next time, imagine if 1920s gangsters were all children and their weapons were cream pies. Now, throw in a few songs and you've got the mobster musical comedy Bugsy Malone, which came out almost exactly 50 years ago. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've seen Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, let me know what you thought of it.